When the news broke yesterday that Clemson has now filed suit against the ACC to try to get out of the league and out of that grant of rights, it puts us one step closer to the ACC potentially imploding. And is it possible that these two schools are doing this and they don't even have a landing spot yet? Is it possible that they don't end up in the SEC or the Big Ten, but have another option? That's what we're going to talk about in this video today, and we're going to do that right after this word from my sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, this episode is brought to you by Dutch Miller Automotive, where friends and family pricing means you get the best deal right up front on any new or pre-loved vehicle in stock every time. With brands like Chevrolet, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Kia, Hyundai, Ford, GMC, Buick, and Subaru, the Dutch Miller Automotive family is always growing and ready to put you in the car or truck you've been searching for. Check out our inventory across West Virginia at DutchMillerAuto.com or come in today to the home of friends and family pricing, only at a Dutch Miller Automotive store near you. What is up? Come on in, make yourself comfortable, belly yourself up to the bar, and let me pour you out this shot of top shelf college football content. On tap at Cougars Corner today, we are once again talking about potential future conference realignment, and I'm going to touch on how it may impact my school, West Virginia. We're going to get to that later in the episode. But first, let's talk about the ACC. We all know Florida State and the ACC are suing each other in court. Florida State's trying to get out of that grant of rights, trying to get out of the league. They've made it public. It's been messy. Well, yesterday, March the 19th, Clemson has announced that they are now suing the ACC and also trying to get out of the grant of rights. Now, I'm not going to get into that piece of it too deep. A lot of other channels have covered it. Greg Flugar, my friends over at College Football Mafia, they did a show about it last night. Go check that out. But what I want to touch on is specifically an option that Ross Dellinger mentioned in an article he wrote last night, that the SEC and Big Ten may not even be the end game here for these two schools and others that could leave the ACC. Now, I want to take us back to an interview that was done with Arizona State's president and AD right after it was announced that they would be coming and joining the Big 12. I touched on this in a past video. Now, this was done well before we knew for sure about Florida State looking into private equity money and all that. There's been a lot of articles and stuff out on that since. This is at the time it was just being rumored that Florida State was looking into private equity. We've since found out they are. And it's kind of been hinted at what the reasons are behind them doing that. But during an interview last summer, Arizona State President Michael Crow had this to say.
There are lots of people trying to figure this out, but everybody's trying to figure it out from slightly different views. So Florida State apparently is out, thinking, can they build a privately funded college football network? Well, error.
That came from the 12 News YouTube channel over in Arizona when Michael Crow was speaking to what's going on throughout college football, throughout college athletics today. He said Florida State's looking to privately fund a college football network. Now, none of us have heard that anywhere else. So maybe that's not what Florida State's looking to do. Or is it? Now, I'll link to the video where I talked about this right after it happened. I was, to my knowledge, the only person who really focused on that comment. Everybody else was focused on other comments through that interview. But that stuck out to me as a bombshell. Maybe he knew what Florida State was up to. But everybody's been saying, well, yeah, but in order to have a network, you've got to have other schools. You've got to have multiple teams. You've got to have a lot of things in place to do that. Maybe that's in the works and we don't know it. But even besides that, even leaving that aside, even if a network is not part of the discussion, could it at least lead us to believe that Florida State and Clemson have another plan outside of just the Big Ten or the SEC? Because there are some out there saying in the media that the SEC and Big Ten may not want those two schools. That's possible. They may not want to expand anymore right now. And even if they do, maybe those two schools aren't their targets. Maybe North Carolina is their target. We've heard that from multiple sources. Now, I'm going to pull up part of an article that Ross Dellinger wrote. I'm going to leave a link to the whole article in the description box, but I'm just going to read you one piece of this article that relates to what I'm talking about in this video today, and that is a potential end game outside of joining the Big Ten or SEC. Where do FSU and Clemson land if the ACC implodes and if they get out of this grant of rights? This is possibly the most asked question of realignment over the last several months. Even if the courts don't grant them a free exit from the ACC, Florida State and Clemson feel destined to leave the league, even if that means paying an exorbitant amount, as much as $500 million each, or striking a settlement. Would the ACC give in at some point? To use a somewhat tired analogy, the FSU and Clemson ships have untethered from the ACC port and shoved off into the ocean. There's no turning back now. But where do they go? Asked one industry source. They have to have something, said another. Does one untie from a secure place without an agreement to be welcomed into another? And that's kind of been my thought. They've got to have a landing spot or they wouldn't be doing this. But as we read further into this, I don't know that Ross Dellinger agrees with that. Back to the article. It says, before leaping to conclusions about the SEC and Big Ten's interest in the Noles and Tigers, let's visit several other paths in which the two schools could find a more suitable home. Number one is a complete ACC implosion. For the most part, the league is held together by the deal with ESPN. There are largely two ways that ESPN itself could set fire to the contract. If the league drops below the requisite 15-member threshold, or if ESPN elects next February to decline to opt into the final 9 years of a contract that extends through 2036. We all found out through the Florida State lawsuit that apparently ESPN has the option to pull the plug on the ACC deal in 2027. Let's keep going. If ESPN ends the deal, or if FSU and Clemson are successful in setting precedent and exiting the grant of rights, the ACC will be much like the Pac-12, with many of its members left desperate and searching for homes as its more valuable schools either coalesce or join other conferences. In this scenario, 8 to 10 of the programs could reform the ACC into a smaller and more valuable conference. A curing of the league, and one of the topics discussed among the 7 last spring. The Magnificent 7 is what he's talking about. It was a group of 7 ACC schools who got together to try to figure out a way out of the grant of rights. It was Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, and Miami. Let's keep going. Such a move could conceivably leave a handful of basketball powers, Louisville and Duke specifically, to be poached by the country's most valuable basketball conferences and its aggressive commissioner, the Big 12 and Brett Yormark. Number 2 option, a sweeping college athletics landscape shakeup. College athletics is at a time of unprecedented change, much of it attributed to an athletes' rights movement around directly paying major college football and basketball players. A pay-for-play system is on the horizon, and so maybe, too, is a complete separation from those programs that can afford to pay their athletes directly and those schools that cannot or choose not to do so. It's been no secret. The SEC and Big Ten, as well as the NCAA, are exploring new athlete compensation models in an effort to potentially settle the House antitrust case. Such a new model could bring an overhaul to the entire conference landscape of the sport. Could such an overhaul impact television contracts and disrupt conferences altogether? Here's the third option, joining another league. Ah, yes, the option everyone wants to talk about, but perhaps not the most likely scenario for specifically FSU and Clemson. It is unlikely that any SEC or Big Ten school will agree to accept a reduction in their TV distribution to add any school. For the SEC, that is especially so given its footprint. The league already owns a foothold in South Carolina and in Florida. Also, the SEC programs in those states would likely make a fuss, if they haven't already, over inviting into the league their arch rivals. See Texas A&M's reaction to the SEC inviting Texas. In order for the Big Ten and SEC to expand, they'd likely need more money from their television partners. A lot more money, more than $100 million a year. That's primarily Fox for the Big Ten and ESPN for the SEC. There is one problem with this. There isn't as much money in the market as there once was, said a conference official with knowledge of the network's dealings. Exhibit A is the Pac-12, and Exhibit B, the decline of linear cable. Could FSU and Clemson be added on the cheap like SMU, Stanford, and Cal? Those teams are only receiving a portion of ACC distribution. The same goes for Washington and Oregon, which joined the Big Ten for half a distribution check for at least 7 years. Sure. However, there is one current ACC program that many within the industry believe is the most attractive expansion target for the Power Two, and it's not FSU or Clemson. North Carolina, said an industry source, is the linchpin. That's who they want. They want to get into the state of North Carolina. They want to get that name brand of North Carolina, that flagship university. So that leads me to my point about how could this affect West Virginia. If you go back to Michael Crow's comments that maybe Florida State's looking to form a privately funded network. Maybe it wasn't necessarily a network they're wanting to fund. Maybe they're looking to see, can they make it can they form another conference? And if there's form another conference, which was one of the options Ross Dellinger gave here, if they form another conference, they obviously have to have teams to go in that conference. And guess what they have to have? A network to air the games. So maybe Michael Crow, even if his comment wasn't totally accurate, maybe it's directionally accurate in that a network would have to be part of that equation, would it not? And what other teams would be in such a conference? Obviously, you have Florida State and Clemson. Maybe North Carolina is the next in line to try to leave the ACC, but it sounds like they might have a landing spot in the Big Ten or SEC. So maybe they're not part of that. Maybe North Carolina State goes with North Carolina if they have to be a package deal, or maybe they don't. Maybe maybe the Board of Regents, the state over the North Carolina system, won't allow them to leave the ACC or be separated. So maybe they have to go form this new conference with Florida State and Clemson. Maybe Virginia Tech are part of that as well. Now, Miami apparently was part of the group that agreed to sue Florida State, so it looks like they might not be part of that. But so let's just say you have 6 schools right now who could potentially leave the ACC and form another league. Well, that's not enough teams to blow the league up. You've got to have a couple more. Maybe Louisville decides to leave for the Big 12. Maybe Duke decides to leave because they see the writing on the wall, so they go to the Big 12 to form this basketball conference. Or what if these 6 schools or even 7 schools decide, hey, we're going to go out and form a league of our own? And it would be more valuable than ACC that we're in now because we wouldn't have schools like Wake Forest, Boston College, Syracuse, now SMU, Stanford, and Cal. We wouldn't have those quote-unquote bottom-tier schools from a revenue standpoint holding us down. You would have better brands, stronger brands in this conference. But they're going to need more schools in this conference if they want to compete with the SECs and the Big Tens of the world, are they not? You need at least 8 to have a conference anyway. That's where West Virginia comes into play. Now, I'm putting my tinfoil hat on here just a minute, my invisible tinfoil hat. Maybe if that conference gets formed, you see it'd be more of a regional conference. You've got teams in the Southeast and near the coast, but for the most part. They're going to need more than just 7 or 8 schools, more than likely, to make it a viable, competitive conference. So maybe they go to the Big 12 and pick off West Virginia. If you're a West Virginia fan, think about this for a minute. If you're a West Virginia fan, would you rather be in a conference with Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, potentially Miami, North Carolina State, Virginia Tech, maybe throw Pitt in the mix, I don't know. Maybe Duke, I don't know. Or would you rather stay in the Big 12 with Kansas State, Iowa State? No, and I'm not talking about nothing against those schools, but when you look regionally, you could be in a conference that's could arguably be worth more money with brands like Clemson and Florida State in it. How valuable would that conference be? I think it would be extremely valuable. Both of those 2 brands alone are more valuable than anybody in the Big 12 right now. Let's be honest. No, I love my Big 12 brethren. I love you. And I'm one of you. West Virginia is one of you. But those 2 brands alone are bigger brands than any school we have in our conference, including mine, West Virginia, and including my team. So why would you not want to marry yourself to those schools and those brands if you had the opportunity? Now, I'm not saying this is going to happen. I still think this is a less likely scenario than these schools finding a home in the SEC or Big Ten. But apparently it's on the table. If you go back to what Michael Crow said, because like I mentioned in that video, these presidents talk to each other. They know what's going on around college athletics. Maybe he's onto something, at least directionally. And you pair that with what Ross Dellinger is putting in this article, that it doesn't seem as if the SEC and Big Ten are really excited about adding these two schools. They'd rather have North Carolina. Maybe they're figuring out on their own that they're going to go form a new league. But a team like West Virginia might be valuable enough to be a part of that league. And it keeps it regional for their Olympic sports and even for their football programs and for basketball. Think about that. Think about it. It's possible. Is it likely? No. But is it possible? Absolutely. In today's world of college athletics, with conference realignment, almost anything is possible. I don't rule hardly any of this out. Now, we all know the importance of Notre Dame. I did a video just a couple of days ago on Notre Dame and whether or not I think they eventually join a conference. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but that is a members-only video. So if you want to check out that video, hit the join button today, become a pub-level member or a club-level member for $2.99 or $4.99 a month, just like the people scrolling along at the bottom of the screen now. Matthew 1981, Heath Stokes, Bill G., and Phil LeMasters. Those are 4 of my current VIP channel members. If you want to become one of those and have access to the members-only content, then please join the channel today. There's going to be more members-only content coming. Also, want to announce that I have partnered with the fine folks over at College Football Mafia. I will be doing some videos over on their members-only section as well. So go check out College Football Mafia and all the work they do over there. They have Big 12 Mafia, the Moment After Dark show, Big 10 West Mafia, Wild Ute University. Have a lot of great content over there at College Football Mafia. They do live streams almost every night of the week. Go check them out. I'm proud to be part of their team. If you want to check out the video I mentioned earlier that I did several months ago about this Florida State situation and Arizona State president's comments, you can check out the video that's on the screen right here. I appreciate you tuning into this episode. Have a top shelf day and Q Country Roads.